Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have with us Matthew Stibbe, who's the CEO of Articulate Marketing. Matthew, welcome to the program.
Mike, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And I really love the name Articulate Marketing, because to me, that sounds like you need to be very precise and articulate your message in your marketing. And boy, we could probably talk for 9 hours straight on just that one thought right there. So let's dive into that in just a second. But you've got quite the detailed and long past. Give us a little bit of a snapshot of your entrepreneurial journey.
Well, I started off in computer games, did that for 10 years, and I made all kinds of games for Lego and Sony and Hasbro, and built that company up to about 70-odd people and sold it, what now feels like a long time ago, in the year 2000. And then I got into journalism, and I used to write for Wired and Popular Science and magazines like that. And off the back of that, got into this marketing game, got into writing for corporations like Microsoft and Hewlett-Packard, and that really was where Articulate marketing began, on the segue from copywriting, from journalism into copywriting. So I've rattled around a bit, and along the way, I got my pilot's license, and I started a wine business and blog about management. So yes, I'm a man of parts, many of which still work.
Yep. Well, I'm sure we could probably lay out like a whiteboard in a conference room with all of those and create some little threads that connect and go, well, if you really look closely, this connects to this because of. And I find that we do that in our lives and have a lot of layers, and that kind of keeps things really exciting. So that's awesome.
I think the thread that connects all of that fundamentally for me is that at heart, I'm a bit of a geek. Computer games and writing about technology and helping tech companies communicate their positioning and helping them grow their customer base and so on. Technology and a passionate enthusiasm about technology runs all the way through it.
I love that because
and then there's
background.
wine.
Well, and then there's that. Yeah. Awesome. When you mentioned that your background in technology and how you work with a lot of technology clients, one thing jumps into my mind. When I first started off saying, hey, let's talk about how you help your clients articulate their message and keep it clear and concise. To me, I would venture to say that many of your clients in any industry would need that help because it's so hard. But I would wonder if you find that people in the technology sector especially need that, because there's a lot of what I have heard called technobabble, in any industry. But it's like, oh, your thing, so you're just going to blast everything you know about it in your website marketing and think that since you know all the detailed stuff, now all of a sudden, so should your target market. But that's not always the case. So how do you find helping your clients, especially technology clients, really dial their messaging in so that their target audience understands it clearly?
I think you hit the nail on the head. How do you get their audience to understand it? And when people are very comfortable and excited about technology or about whatever line of business they're in, they tend to have a language, a jargon, an understanding that they are enthusiastic and knowledgeable about. I mean, certainly if you've spent your lifetime solving people's IT problems or helping them move their databases to the cloud or whatever it may be, you fall into we see this a lot with our clients anyway, you fall into the trap of assuming that your audience feels the same way you do, understands what you do, and appreciates the expertise that you have acquired. And therefore, if only you could communicate that expertise in your language effectively, they would have no choice but to hand over money and hire you. Well, the reality is this is the man or the person in the mirror problem. Most of the time, our clients are not techies particularly. They're trying to solve a problem. So they want to be talked to about their issues in their language, not about the technology in the technologist's language. And so this sort of technobabble comes from a very understandable place of trying to communicate, talk about what matters to you, but it isn't necessarily what matters to the audience. So I think that it's for companies that are trying to find their positioning.
Oh, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, sorry, Mike. There's just a time zone lag because I'm over here in London and you're all the way across the pond. I think the biggest challenge, or the easiest way companies can help find their story and their messaging, is to make the imaginative effort to put themselves into the minds of their customers. And you can do that relatively easily by talking to them and understanding what makes them tick and understanding what they look at and read and think about and care about. And you'll pretty quickly find it, most of the time, they're not caring about your products or services.
You're exactly right. And I think that you said something really impactful there is, and you probably just say it because it's just what you guys do, but, do you know how to get into the mind of your prospect and your target audience, to get into their psyche? There's this really high-level algorithm, artificial intelligence technique that probably no one knows how to do, but I'm going to go ahead and teach it to you guys right now. You ask them. It's like, it's very simple.
Don't tell anyone because it's our secret, right?
You listen, you ask, you create little, maybe like listening boards. And those listening boards could very easily just be your social media. It could very well just be, your incoming email communication where someone is asking questions to your customer service department. Well, you must make sure that you know what your target audience knows. And sometimes it is, you got to be proactive about that. And it reminds me of, I'm pretty sure it's a Albert Einstein quote, but it's something to the effect of, if you cannot explain your process to a 6-year-old, you don't understand it yourself. And that kind of really hits you in between the eyes as far as technobabble, doesn't it?
Well, that reminds me of a Groucho Marx quote. This can be understood by a 6-year-old child. Quick, bring me a 6-year-old child.
Yeah, right.
But I agree. I think it reminded me of something one of my colleagues once said about a client. I'm going to go and give them a damn good listening to. And it takes me back to when I was doing a lot of work for Microsoft a long time ago. We were helping craft the messaging and positioning for Microsoft Small Business Server 2003. So that dates the conversation. And we had all these business owners come in and do focus groups. And I was sat for a day behind a one-way mirror listening to these business owners talk about technology in their business. And the one thing that came up again and again and again was they were terrified of losing their data. They couldn't, if one owner had their server stolen, another one had a fire and they lost all their data. It came up as a big issue. Well, Microsoft desperately wanted to talk about Small Business Server. It's got a database, it's got your email, it does calendars, it does this, it does that. But it also had backup software in it. And I persuaded them in the UK that they should position the backup software, which was from Microsoft's perspective, was really the smallest part of the software, as one of the leading benefits. You have all your data on this server, and we will make sure it's backed up and safe for you. And that made a really big difference. But that insight only came from listening to business owners talk about their issues rather than listening to the technologists who are so proud of their database and so proud of Exchange Server. So I think this makes me think of that quote from Jason Fried, who founded Basecamp. He said, there's a huge difference between this is what our software does and this is what you can do with our software. But if you can make that imaginative leap whether it's for software or swimming pools or a car or, a bottle of wine, whatever it is you sell. If you can make that imaginative leap into the mind of the consumer and what they care about and what they want, I think that's a really, really important starting point. And then you just listen for the thing that's going to resonate.
100%, and it reminds me too. We keep doing these. Well, you said this, and it reminds me of that, and that's perfect. That shows we are well educated in the world of business. But you know how people say when you go to a networking event, here's how to be the very best conversationalist ever. You walk up to someone and smile and ask them a question about themselves. And then you nod and smile and ask them another question about their business and nod and so on and so forth. And you'll leave that conversation with that person thinking and saying, wow, Matthew was just a great conversationalist. And all you did was ask them about themselves. So now what I would say is let's circle that back into when you're working with brands and you're helping them understand this lesson we just talked about. Listen to your customer, find out what they need so that you can deliver it to them in your messaging, keeping it clear. Well, now let's take it to the next level and assume that now they really understand the problem they have and the solution that they need. Now they're trying to pick a provider. It might be company A, B, or C. Now let's talk about how brands can stand out and differentiate, because the first step is actually listening and having a clear message. Good. But then what?
And then comes what I call the pointy pebble. What do I mean by that? Well, most business owners are afraid of alienating potential customers. I think in their heart, most small business owners think that they can sell their thing to everybody on the planet. And if they say anything controversial or position it in such a way that they might be missing out on some customers, they're going to lose things. So the tendency is to blandness. The tendency is to polish the pebble until it's very, very smooth. And actually, if you allow a sharp edge or two, you can appeal to some people. I think it's much better to have 20 or 30% of your potential audience be huge fans and everybody else indifferent or hate you, than to have everyone go, I don't care, and shrug their shoulders because you're so boring and you're so like everybody else. So if you look around the world of business, Richard Branson and Virgin Airlines, they're always being a bit cheeky. There's always a little bit of a sharp edge somewhere in there. And Steve Jobs said, if you're appealing to 100% of your audience, you're failing in some way. That's not a direct quote, but this idea that you kind of almost success is defined by having a few good enemies and a few people that you alienate and don't really appeal to. And David C. Baker, whose book I like very much, The Business of Expertise, he talks about targeting a small subset of your potential total target market and making yourself indispensably, uniquely valuable to them, rather than trying to be averagely valuable to a much wider audience. And I think that train of thought is very important. I think the way you communicate your difference is around identifying the subset of your potential audience for whom you are really could be very good, and then communicating in a way that appeals to them, but doesn't quite resonate with other people. And I'll give you a really good example of this. They're not a client of ours, we don't work for them, but there is a company in the UK that supplies IT services to dentists, okay? And their website is full of fantastic stuff about IT and dentistry and things that dentists care about, their computers, like, keyboards that have plastic covers on so they don't get dirty and things like that. Yeah. It means nothing to any other business. But if you're a dentist, this is the business website, this is the IT service you want. And they've got 70 to 80% of the UK dentists as clients. I think that's genius. And that's not a smooth round pebble. That is somebody who knows their market and is talking to them directly about their issues and being really clear. So their website's full of pictures of dentists using computers, which alienates everybody else, but dentists love.
And let's even take that thought to the next step. And whatever company this is, let's say that you and me and their CEO were talking about a business expansion strategy. And I made this recommendation, or you and I made this recommendation. You own 70 to 80% of the market in dentist in the UK, and you've done a spectacular job. So now let's have let's just say a CEO of that division, and let's hire a business development vice president, CEO of doing the exact same thing, take a clone cookie cutter template of exactly what you've done for dentists, and now start building it for the next vertical. Let's call it chiropractors. Let's call it attorneys, whatever you want to think of it as, but go in very...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And you can, most people who specialize like that company don't have 70 or 80% of their market. Yeah. I mean, there aren't that many monopolist businesses out there. I would have thought you could build an extremely attractive IT business serving 10% of the UK dentist market. But if you wanted to do that, you could do it for American dentists, or, if you want to stay in English, or Australian dentists. I mean, there's no reason why you couldn't do that, or hire a German and do German dentists. There's always expansion strategies, and I think there's always room for growth. Modern economies are so big. The idea that you're going to just sell IT services to every small business in the country is crazy. The idea actually that you could sell IT services to every dentist in the country is pretty lofty and ambitious, although this company is doing it. But I think the growth is going to come, success is going to come by being really, really good at the thing you do. And communicating that, building that trust, building that relationship with people.
The issue, I think, if we took that little mini hot seat case study to the next step, that CEO would say to us, I love it, we're going to do it. And then we fast forward 6 months and we have another meeting and they say, look, we've done it. And the problem is their messaging gets muddied up, because what they did was they started just another page on their website for attorneys or chiropractors or whatever vertical, and that now diffused their marketing messaging and watered it down. When in reality, you need to start a whole other entity that's another pillar up underneath your company. So that is not the purpose of, that thought process right there is merely to make the point. Stay on point, keep your message clear.
Correct.
And there's a wonderful book, I hope you've read it, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, where he teaches if you confuse, you lose. Yes.
I haven't heard that, but I'm going to go read it. I think that's absolutely right. If you look like you're a feather for every wind that blows, that actually is quite alienating. And I think it's sort of interesting as well, because we see... When we have this conversation with, our world is IT and tech companies. We have this conversation with tech companies, and they say, well, yeah, but we sell, we have some dentists who are clients, but we also have some estate agents and we have some lawyers, and we don't want to alienate those people. And I say to them, you're not going to lose your clients that you've got just because you change your positioning. Don't worry about that, but you're going to attract more clients in the sector that you choose to go into. And as you say, I think it's very wise. With modern marketing, you can spin up new websites, new brands, new positioning very easily. We've talked about vertical positioning, but of course, it can also be around product positioning or age groups or geographic positioning. There's all kinds of other ways of doing this. But you have to identify who you want to talk to and then talk their language.
100%. I think that's... It becomes one of the foundational pieces in marketing is you must understand your target audience. You must understand your true dialed in competitive advantage, and then you must communicate that clearly to them in bite-sized digestible pieces so that they don't feel overwhelmed. And then they take that first step and you deliver on that. And then you say, okay, now you're ready for the next step. Congratulations. You need now to have this next piece or phase or whatever, and now they're coming along with you, rather than if you showed them the whole, entire puzzle that you're going to walk them through. It feels like a maze, whereas you want them to feel like, okay, take a glance at this picture. This is where you're going to be. This is the transformation of where we're going to take you, whatever the service is, and we're going to start right here. And I'm going to be right there with you. I'm going to guide you through the process. It's going to be very easy, but you're going to get results from, even phase one. And then at the end of phase one, great. You've got that dialed into your organization, your business. We're going to take the next step to phase two and look at where we're heading. And I think that that's right there where people really miss the boat. They want to tell them everything about everything and sell them the big package, and it just scares people off.
I love your phrase, dialed in competitive advantage, and it makes me think of two things, mistakes that I see. The first one is dialed in competitive advantage is almost never price, right? Because in any market or sector, any one company can be the cheapest, and that's a really uncomfortable place to be, and it's really easy for somebody to outflank you on that. So that, and the second thought that I have is, how can I express this? You need to be able to communicate that competitive advantage in some way that connects with the audience, not in juxtaposition to your perceived competitors, right? Most of the time, your biggest competitor is going to be whoever is the incumbent or doing nothing. It's not going to be the other 5 IT companies in your hometown or the other 5 dentists in your hometown. So competitive advantage, I think when you talk about managers, they tend to think of the other people who do what they do as competitors, and in a way they are. But it's very rarely that you are in a beauty parade against 3 other dentists or 3 other wine companies or 3 other marketing agencies or whatever. It's much more to do with where the person is who's buying and what their options are at that time, and to use that phrase, what their jobs to be done are. So I think sort of focusing on your competitive advantage, your dialed in competitive advantage, in terms that make sense for the buyer rather than your business plan competitive advantage. I think that's really important.
Because you know what everyone's favorite radio station is? I don't care if you're in the United States or the UK. Everyone's favorite radio station is WIIFM. What's in it for me? And if you can dial into your target audience and realize that they're listening to WIIFM, what's in it for them, you're not talking about your organization and the best staff that you have. Of course, they hope you have that. You're having to dial that competitive advantage in to speak to them and say, you will appreciate the fact that we have the highest cutting edge level, dentistry, equipment and IT, and you will appreciate this because it'll cut the time down that you are servicing your whatever. And now all of a sudden that's talking to them in the way that they want to be spoken to. So you really, really brought excellent points there, Matthew. Let's wrap this up with, what's the best way people can reach out and connect with you, learn more about Articulate Marketing? Because I have a feeling that we could probably go on for about 6.5 more hours, but we better tie it off here and call it a wrap.
Well, thank you. If you are interested in learning more about marketing generally and how we approach that and the things we've been talking about, there's a great blog on articulatemarketing.com. And also I run a fortnightly webinar there where I share my ideas. That hopefully would be useful for anyone who's interested in marketing. And for anything to do with management and computer games and being a geek, geekboss.com is my personal blog.
Excellent. Well, Matthew, thank you so much for coming on. It was a real pleasure having you on the show today.
It's been my pleasure, Mike. And who would have thought we'd spend 20 minutes talking?
Yep. Awesome. Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneursradio.com.